These are the walking wounded, casualties of the U.S. opioid crisis. On the streets of New York City, scenes of despair play out again and again, and lives lived on the edge are constantly at risk. Every day in the United States, an estimated 115 people overdose and die. That is fueling a push for supervised injection sites, a controversial measure that's already used in Canada, but in the States, it is practically untested and highly suspect. On tonight's Dispatch, Steven D'Souza zeroes in on New York and the birth of a movement.
Come on in. I want you to just watch your step.
This is a tour of Manhattan most people never see. Tucked away in a park behind a major bridge, a makeshift den, where drug users come to get away and get high.
So this is a place to use here?
This is right here is a place to use.
The ground is littered with the remnants of the drug epidemic sweeping the city and the country.
And this is going to be pretty busy between the day this week, so I'm going to leave these supplies right here.
As an outreach worker, Mike Bailey leaves fresh needles and life-saving naloxone, the medicine used to quickly reverse some overdoses. He says it's a lifeline for those living on the fringes.
We're not that far from society, but if somebody OD, nobody's to know.
There's an overdose death in New York every 7 hours, more than 1,400 in the city last year alone, more than suicides, murders, and car accidents combined. Over 80% involved opioids.
How bad is the problem with drug use in this area right now?
I'm not going to say it's critical, but it's serious.
So we got 1,500 syringes out of St. Mary's yesterday and 800 out of Tremont today.
New York's debate over supervised injection sites is one Mark Townsend knows all too well. The longtime BC housing activist helped found North America's first safe injection site in Vancouver. 2 years ago, he came to New York to work for harm reduction agencies here.
It's a bit deja vu, and that's a bit upsetting because you can see what happened in Canada is going to happen here.
In the late 90s, with HIV rates soaring and overdose deaths reaching record levels, Townsend was part of a group that fought all the way to the Supreme Court to open and keep a supervised injection facility in Vancouver. Its goal, to give drug users a place to use safely, under supervision, with access to support services.
Board for July 1 or no?
Townsend's wife, Liz Evans, was part of that group. She's now executive director at New York Harm Reduction Educators. She says despite the research done in Vancouver and more than 100 supervised sites around the world, the debate in America is still in the early stages.
Because it's still a fairly new idea here. It hasn't been around in the public conscience for a long time, so people have a lot of questions, and there's still a lot of education that needs to be done.
From Seattle to Philadelphia, San Francisco to Massachusetts, and now New York, plenty of American jurisdictions have studied, even promised to open supervised injection sites. But so far, no city has taken that controversial next step. New York's mayor supports the sites, wanting to label them overdose prevention centers. A city health department study says the 4 sites being proposed could save more than 130 lives a year. But like elsewhere, opposition is strong. Some don't want the problem in their backyard. The sites are also still illegal under U.S. law. Staten Island District Attorney Michael McMahon told CBC News in a statement, "I believe creating supervised injection sites undermines prevention and treatment efforts and only serves to normalize the use of these deadly drugs." For agencies like the one Mark Townsend now works with, it means finding an alternative that can blur legal lines.
So this is it here?
Yeah, this is the bathroom. We have 2 operating here. And
Canadian Jesse Reed worked at Vancouver's injection site before moving here in October. He joined Townsend at the Washington Heights Corner Project, where their bathrooms have generated plenty of controversy. Drug users, whom they call participants, are given 15 minutes alone, no questions asked. They're given supplies if they need them.
you all right? You actually have 5 minutes left.
Every 5 minutes, someone checks on them. If there's no response, Jesse and the other staff are prepared with a closet full of life-saving supplies to treat overdoses.
Personally, I think it's barbaric that we have to pretend this is a bathroom in order to do service provision, but we have to do what we have to do.
Townsend and Evans' time in BC didn't end well. In 2014, they were under a cloud of controversy. An internal audit commissioned by the BC government found questionable expenses, and the two were forced out. Townsend maintains there was no misspending, and the expense reviews were politically motivated.
I think when you try and change things and when you have political battles, you get lots of scars.
Here in New York, they have an audience eager to hear the gospel of harm reduction. They also frequently return to Vancouver, bringing with them police, prosecutors, and politicians to show insight in action. Townsend says the challenge is convincing Americans that the war on drugs isn't the best approach.
Having been around this block, it's depressing that that's their starting position. I always feel if you could sit down with them, or like we've done with other people, show them the reality of these things, they'd change their mind.
There are more battles ahead. New York is studying its legal options, and Evans says, like in Canada, where nothing came easy, they could end up in court.
And the truth is, what's going on here isn't working. If it was working, we wouldn't be in the crisis that we're in, and people wouldn't be dying.
Jesse Reed says the evidence is here in this bathroom, where they haven't had a single overdose death.
I left a battle zone, and I came into another one. But, hopefully our experience can benefit people here, and we can actually change the way things are right now.
I don't judge nobody what they do, because I was there.
Back on our tour, Michael Bailey says he hopes some Canadian influence can convince those in power that change is needed on these streets.
We have to put pressure on them, showing them that it works in Amsterdam, it works in Canada, it will work in New York.
Until then, he's going to keep working, helping those he can, and picking up the pieces of the lives lived in the city's darkest corners. Steven D'Souza, CBC News, New York.
Now, as Stephen said, Canada's fight over supervised injection sites went all the way to the Supreme Court. They can be operated legally, but that doesn't mean they are universally accepted. In fact, it is expected to be a controversial issue with Ontario's incoming government.
I ask anyone out there, if your son, daughter, loved one ever had an addiction, would you want them to go in a little area and do more drugs? I am dead against that.
Ontario's next Premier, Doug Ford, campaigned on a promise to shut down the sites and to focus more on rehabilitation. The previous Liberal government approved 7 facilities, 5 are now in operation.
We really worked hard with a group of architects and builders to create a very warm, welcoming and safe, respectful space for our clients.
Supporters say lives are being saved while also admitting the optics can be ugly for non-users.
It's good in one way, but it's not good in another way as for family-wise. People don't want their kids seeing things like this.
When Toronto's Board of Health meets tomorrow, it will consider a motion that urges the province to maintain support for overdose prevention.